Michael McClanahan, thanks so much for joining us. I first saw you on TV in Baton Rouge at the news conference where people had gathered to decry the killing of Alton Sterling. Can you talk about what you understand happened and what you're calling for right now? What happened on Tuesday?
Good morning. Thank you for having me on. As I appreciate what happened was Alton Sterling was doing what a lot of young brothers do as entrepreneurs, sell CDs, what we call hustle work, to provide for their families. And he had been doing it a long time. And while there, I understand that the police department dispatch office received a call that the gentleman, Alton, was brandishing a gun. They came on the scene within a few minutes of arriving on the scene. They tased, jumped on, and shot this gentleman without giving him a reason why they're stopping him, without doing any of the training that I've known them to do in terms of when you confront the community. And now after that has happened, you see many in the community coming out saying that had happened to me. I was accosted. I was unlawfully detained and beat up and what have you. So this is years of frustration, fear, and as your guest said, denial on other parts that stuff like this just do not happen.
The police say a call came in just after midnight. They now have identified a homeless man who made this call, who said Alton Sterling had a gun. Now, you're allowed to have a gun in Louisiana, right? Open carry laws.
Well, you are. You are allowed to carry a weapon. I don't know to the extent that he had a weapon, but clearly, if the police officer in their training dictated that they were going to arrive on the scene, which a weapon may have been involved, there are certain things that they're trained to do. From what I gather from my looking at the video, none of that took place.
What are you calling for right now, Mike McClanahan?
Well, there's a culture in the Baton Rouge Police Department that has allowed this type of action to happen for years, for decades. I'm calling for this culture to be rooted out. That means police officers who conduct this type of action need to be brought to justice on other cases. I call for the mayor to step down and for the police chief to resign, because the mayor appoints the police chief, really controls the police chief. The police chief is a good friend of mine, but friendship in this type of business has to step aside for the people's business, which is more important. And I'm asking those that involve the police chief and the mayor to resign so others can come in, root out this evil, root out the 1% of bad police officers that cause these type of harms in our community, to be pushed to the side, to be kicked out of the department, and those that who want to take serious the business of serve and protect, to get about the business of serving and protecting.
And what do you think should happen to the police officers who killed Alton Sterling?
I'm glad you asked, because anyone that commits a crime, anyone that commits an act such as the act they committed, would be arrested, put in jail, and the process of justice would take place. These officers should not get a free pass. They should be arrested. They should be charged and let the system work. If it worked for some, it should work for all. No one should be exempt from the system.
What about that, Mark Lamont Hill? And I also want to ask former police officer Graham Weatherspoon about arresting officers.
Yeah, well, you know, I come out of a prison abolitionist tradition, and so obviously my long-term vision for what law enforcement and justice should look like is not tied to mass incarceration. It's not tied to caging people. It's tied to things that are restorative. That said, within the context of this system at this moment, police cannot be above the system. You cannot have a system that criminalizes and incarcerates its citizens, but not the agents of the state when they violate those very same laws. We see time after time after time that when law enforcement kills us, nothing happens. If it's on tape, nothing happens. If it's not on tape, nothing happens. At some point, we need to engage in a process of transparency, but also critical distance. For me, that means citizen review boards, civilian review boards. That means having some kind of mechanism to police the police, to oversee the police, to make sure that they get brought to justice in the same way that citizens do.
Graham Weatherspoon.
Yes. I've worked on cases where I've investigated police officers and had no problem sending them to prison for the crimes that they committed. They were not police officers, they were criminals. Nobody is above the law. And when a police department fails to clean house, it minimizes the possibility of good police-community relations. We have to have a transparent process where citizen and police officer are held to the same standard. As a matter of fact, a police officer should be held to a higher standard. When I entered the transit police department 40-some-odd years ago, they had a statute in there that said if you were married and engaged in an extramarital affair, you were terminated. That was the standard then. It's not the standard now.
Nor was that probably ever enforced. But
no, it was. It was enforced. I know people that were terminated. But the thing is this, that a police officer has to be held to a higher standard. You cannot use an excuse, I had a bad day, I was afraid. No, if you're afraid, stay home with mommy. This is not a job for people that are scared. Yes, everybody goes out and wants to come home at the end of the day. The life of the police officer is no more valuable than the life of the citizen.